It is often said that the first cup of coffee awakens you, but the one I consumed that morning almost proved fatal. When I first moved to Dayton, Ohio, I didn't know anyone. After a violent breakup, I just wanted a quiet life and a place where nobody asked questions. My apartment was small, one bedroom over a laundromat, and right across the street sat a small cafe called Morning Brew Café. It looked innocent enough. Soft orange lights glowing through fogged windows, the smell of roasted beans and glazed dough drifting into the street every morning. I made it part of my routine before work, a comfort ritual that felt safe in a city that didn't know me. The girl behind the counter, Clara, always greeted me with the same tired smile. She wore her dark hair tied back and a Band-Aid across her thumb that never seemed to come off. Every morning she wrote my name wrong on the cup, and every morning I laughed about it. On my 5th visit, she said, "Careful. Once this place hooks you, you never leave." I thought she was just being adorable. I didn't know how true those words were. After a few weeks, I began noticing small, strange things. The staff changed constantly, new faces every other day. The manager, a stiff, middle-aged man named Mr. Dale, spent most of his time in a locked office behind the kitchen. The others spoke about him in whispers. Once, when the espresso machine broke, a barista said, "Don't let Dale see that, he hates noise." They all laughed nervously afterward like they hadn't meant to speak. Clara told me, almost in a whisper, "Never stay past closing. He doesn't like that." I asked why. She hesitated. Last Christmas, one of the night shift girls disappeared during cleanup. They said she quit, but her coat's still hanging in the back. I tried to brush it off as gossip. Still, every time the back office door creaked open, it felt like the room lost its air. 2 months later, I lost my job and needed work quickly. Clara said Morning Brew was hiring. I filled out the form that afternoon. The next day, I sat across from Mr. Dale in his tiny office. The air smelled like cleaning chemicals, sharp enough to sting my throat. He didn't look at me, just flipped through my application and said in a flat voice, "Be on time, no phones behind the counter, and don't go into the supply room." That last rule hung in the air. I nodded and told myself he was just strict. My first shift began at 5 a.m. The cafe looked different before sunrise. The humming lights flickered. The coffee machines hissed like steam engines. Clara trained me on the register. She was quieter than usual. Around 6:15, the drive-thru bell chimed. Mr. Dale asked me to stay up front while he took care of it, but instead of heading to the window, he walked straight through the door marked supplies. I heard a metallic object open and something heavy scrape across the floor. When he returned, he looked calm, but his hands trembled slightly as he wiped them with a towel that smelled faintly of bleach. By the end of my shift, Clara's eyes were red as if she'd been crying. She whispered, "If you ever get that smell on your clothes, burn them." Before I could ask what she meant, Mr. Dale appeared beside us, and she went silent. The next day when I came in, Clara's name had been scratched off the schedule. In her place, someone had written Amy, trainee. I asked what happened. Mr. Dale said, "She quit. People move on." He smiled for the first time when he said it. That night, I sat in my car across the street, staring through the cafe windows. Around 11, Mr. Dale switched off the neon sign and locked the door. But instead of leaving, he dragged 2 heavy black trash bags out the back door. He looked both ways before lifting the lid of the dumpster. Something slipped from one of the bags, a white sneaker. He shoved it back in quickly and slammed the lid. I couldn't breathe. My fingers hovered over my phone, ready to call the police. But fear froze me. What if I'd misunderstood? What if he saw me watching? The following morning, I returned for my final paycheck. The freezer door was open, and on the white tile floor was a dark smear running toward the drain. I stared until Dale stepped in front of me and said softly, "You shouldn't be back here." I mumbled something about quitting and walked out without looking back. For weeks, I avoided that street, taking the long route to my new job just to keep from smelling the coffee. I convinced myself I'd overreacted. People disappear for all kinds of reasons. Life goes on. But every time I passed another morning, Brew Café in a different part of town, I thought of Clara's Band-Aid thumb and her warning, "Once it hooks you, you never leave." A month later, curiosity got the better of me. One rainy evening, I parked across from the old shop. It had been remodeled, new paint, new counters, cheerful music leaking through the speakers. When I walked in, the girl behind the counter smiled brightly. "Welcome to Morning Brew. What can I get you?" The air smelled sweeter than I remembered. I asked if the manager was around. "Oh, Mr. Dale? He doesn't work here anymore," she said. "Corporate transferred him after the incident." My heart skipped. "What incident?" She hesitated. "Gas leak in the back room. They had to replace all the flooring. It smelled awful." I thanked her and left, the coffee cooling in my hands. At home, I searched the news archives. Only one short article appeared. Employee: missing after Morning Brew Café gas leak. Police investigate possible foul play. The name hit me like a punch. Clara Renshaw, 26, missing. Presumed dead. I told myself to stop digging. But a year later, driving to a client meeting on the opposite side of town, I saw another Morning Brew Café glowing at the corner of Maple Street. For reasons I still don't understand, I pulled in. The sign was newer, the logo modernized, but the building layout was identical. I ordered a black coffee and waited at the counter. While the barista turned to the espresso machine, I noticed a handwritten note taped to the employees-only door. "Lock the freezer after 10. Do not let him in." The handwriting was shaky, almost carved into the paper. The barista returned with my drink, smiling politely. I paid, grabbed the cup, and turned to leave. The bell above the door jingled as someone entered. A man brushed past me wearing a faded apron. His name tag gleamed under the light. Manager. Dale C. He looked exactly the same. Same cold eyes, same smooth voice. "Nice to see you again," he said. "I was hoping you'd come back." I froze, the smell of gas faint in the air, mixing with cinnamon and coffee grounds. My cup slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. When I looked up, he was gone, vanished behind the door marked supplies. I backed out of the shop and into the rain, heart pounding, certain that somewhere behind those walls the same old pipes were hissing, and the same terrible thing that took Clara was still breathing in the dark. They say the night shift changes people, but I never realized how much until I started working at the Morning Brew Café on Lincoln Avenue. I'd been laid off from my factory job the week before, and the cafe's "now hiring overnight bakers and closers" sign looked like salvation. It wasn't glamorous, but the hours fit my schedule. Rent was late, and caffeine smelled better than desperation. The store looked ordinary enough. Warm lights, chalkboard menus, soft jazz looping through cheap speakers. But after midnight, when the traffic died and the hum of refrigerators took over, it felt like the world outside had fallen away. There were only 3 of us, me, Darren, the manager, and Kelly, a college girl who handled the front counter. Darren was in his mid-30s, pale and polite with the permanent half-smile of someone trying too hard to appear normal. He said he'd managed a dozen cafes before this one, but the way he watched the ovens, staring into the glass until his reflection warped, made me think he cared more about what was inside them than the pastries themselves. My first night, Kelly whispered that Darren never clocked out. "He sleeps in the office sometimes," she said. "Says he's got nowhere else to go." I thought she was joking. Then around 3 a.m., I saw a sleeping bag folded under his desk. The job wasn't difficult at first. We cleaned. We prepped the morning batch, and we made sure the drive-thru timer didn't beep for too long. It was quiet work, almost peaceful. But each night, shortly before 2 a.m., Darren would open the walk-in freezer, enter briefly, and emerge with a smile as if he had just been in prayer. He never let anyone else in there. By my 4th shift, Kelly had stopped showing up. Her name was gone from the schedule the next night, replaced with training TBD. When I asked Darren about it, he said she'd transferred to another branch. "Sometimes they can't handle nights," he said. I nodded, but the next morning, As I walked home, police tape blocked off the drainage canal behind the plaza. An officer was knee-deep in the mud, pulling out what looked like a shoe. I told myself it couldn't be hers. The following week, the freezer started acting strange. Whenever I passed by, a faint scraping echoed from the inside, slow and rhythmic like fingernails on steel. The thermometer light flickered even when the power was steady. I mentioned it to Darren, but he just smiled. It's just the compressor. They make sounds when they breathe. When they breathe? I laughed nervously, thinking I'd misheard. That Friday, a storm rolled in. Wind battered the glass. Rain hammered the roof. Only one drive-thru order came in after midnight. A man in a pickup who refused to speak just held up 2 fingers for coffee. When I leaned out the window to pass the cups, I noticed his hands were trembling, and wet and red around the knuckles like he'd been digging in mud. He looked past me toward the back hallway. Then he whispered, "You should quit before he takes you too." Before I could ask what he meant, he sped off into the storm. I told Darren about it. His face went blank. "Probably a drunk," he said. "Forget it." Then casually, "We'll need to restock before morning. Could you help me in the freezer?" I hesitated. He'd never asked that before. The hum behind the metal door sounded louder tonight, like breathing under pressure. My gut screamed no, but I couldn't afford to lose another job. He handed me a flashlight and pushed open the heavy door. The blast of cold hit like a wall. Frost shimmered across the floor tiles. Shelves of dough boxes lined the walls, stacked to the ceiling. The light overhead buzzed weakly. "Go to the back and grab the sugar bags," Darren said. Then the door shut behind me. I thought maybe it had closed on its own. Those doors were heavy. But when I tried the handle, it didn't budge. From outside, I heard the metallic click of the latch locking. My breath clouded in the air as the flashlight beam wavered. "Darren?" I shouted. No answer. Something moved behind the boxes, just a shift of shadow, but enough to stop my heart. I aimed the light toward the sound. A gloved hand was pressed against the wall. The skin beneath the glove was gray, mottled, and stiff. Another movement, a foot scraping across frost. The hand slid down, leaving a trail of something dark that froze almost instantly. I backed away, banging into the metal shelf. The noise echoed, then faded into slow, muffled knocking from inside the wall. 3 knocks, then silence. Panic clawed through me. I rammed the door handle again and again until finally it burst open. I stumbled out, gasping, the cold burning my lungs. Darren stood right there, calm as ever, holding a clipboard. "Everything all right?" My voice shook. "Someone's in there." He glanced past me into the freezer, then back at his paper. "No," he said. "Not anymore. I left that night and didn't come back. The paycheck wasn't worth whatever was happening in that place." I called the corporate number on the schedule board the next morning, but it just rang to voicemail. 2 days later, I saw police cars outside the cafe. I slowed my car, pretending to check my phone. A man in a suit, corporate maybe, was arguing with an officer. A body bag was being wheeled out through the back door. The news said a maintenance employee had died from carbon monoxide exposure. They didn't release the name. The article ended with the line, "The Morning Brew Café Lincoln Avenue location will remain closed until further notice." I tried to move on. But one night, about a month later, I stopped at a different Morning Brew on my way home from visiting my sister. It was across town, brand new, spotless, cheerful. A girl at the register smiled and said, "Welcome. You must be our first customer tonight." Her name tag read Kelly B. I froze. Same face, same nervous smile, but her skin looked too pale. Her movements slightly delayed, as if someone were pulling invisible strings. I asked, "Did you used to work at another branch?" She tilted her head. "Lincoln Avenue," she whispered. Then her smile widened a little too far. "We all transfer eventually," behind her. Through the small window of the kitchen door, I saw a shadow moving past the freezer, tall, with a clipboard in one hand. When I blinked, it was gone. I didn't even take the coffee. I walked out into the cold night, heart pounding, the rain turning everything into smeared streaks of light. From across the parking lot, I looked back once more. Kelly was still standing behind the counter, staring through the glass. The cafe sign flickered, Morning Brew Café. Open 24 hours, before one section of the neon went dark, leaving just the word brew. As I drove away, the radio crackled with static. Through the noise, a voice whispered softly, almost like breath against my ear, "Don't worry, we're always hiring." They say every small town has one place that never closes. For Maple Hollow, that place was the Morning Brew Café. The sign out front buzzed day and night, the same faded yellow mug glowing through rain, snow, and fog. Locals joked that the cafe would remain open even during a hurricane, a testament to the enduring power of caffeine. I'd been living in Maple Hollow for a few months when I got the night shift security job at a nearby warehouse. Every morning after work, I'd stop by Morning Brew before heading home. I liked the quiet. The early crowd hadn't arrived yet, and the barista, Hannah, always had a fresh pot ready. She was older, maybe in her mid-30s, with tired eyes and a polite smile that never reached them. Most mornings she'd be wiping the counter, humming softly under the hum of fluorescent lights. Behind her, the sound of coffee brewing drowned out the same old love songs on the radio. One morning I noticed something off. There was a man sitting alone in the corner booth facing the window. He wore a brown coat and a gray beanie, his face hidden behind the reflection of the neon mug. Nothing strange about that, except he was still sitting there when I left an hour later. The next day, same man, same table, same clothes, same untouched cup of coffee. At first I thought he might be homeless, just trying to stay warm. But every time I saw him, there was a new receipt on his table. Hannah would take his order and bring him the coffee, and he'd never drink it. Just sit there, staring through the glass at the empty parking lot. Curiosity got the better of me. One morning I asked Hannah about him. She hesitated before answering. "His name's Eli," she said quietly. "He used to work here. Years ago." "What happened?" She sighed. "He died. 5 years ago. Car crash off Route 19 right after his shift." I laughed, thinking she was messing with me. "Then who's that sitting in your cafe every morning?" Her eyes didn't blink. "That's what I'd like to know." The next few days I couldn't shake the image of him. At 6 a.m. sharp, I'd drive by the cafe just to check. Through the fogged windows, the brown coat was always there. Some mornings I even caught Hannah standing near the booth talking softly, her hands trembling as she refilled his cup that nobody ever touched. Finally, I decided to confront it myself. One Friday morning, I clocked out early and headed straight to Morning Brew. The parking lot was half frozen, the sky barely gray. When I pushed open the door, a tiny bell rang and the smell of espresso hit me like a wave. There he was. Same booth, same posture. I could hear the faint squeak of leather as he shifted in his seat. Hannah looked up at me and shook her head slightly, like she was warning me not to. I ignored her. I walked right up to the table. "Morning," I said. The man slowly turned his head. His skin looked pale, almost translucent under the lights, and his eyes, those eyes were colorless like glass marbles. He gave a weak smile. "You're early." My mouth went dry. "Do I know you?" He looked down at the untouched coffee and said, "Everyone here knows me. They just forget." Before I could say anything else, Hannah dropped a tray behind the counter. The crash made me jump. When I looked back at the booth, he was gone. Just gone. The door hadn't opened. No footsteps. Only the faint swirl of steam still rising from the coffee cup. I told myself maybe he'd gone to the restroom. I even checked. Empty. When I came out, Hannah was standing near the counter, pale as chalk. "Don't talk to him," she whispered. "It makes him stronger." I wanted answers. "What is he?" She shook her head. "A mistake. The cafe was built over an old house. He died here before the remodel. Corporate covered it up. They say he comes back whenever the lights stay on past 3 a.m. I didn't believe in ghosts. I still don't. But that night, during my warehouse shift, I couldn't focus. Every flicker of light looked like his reflection. Every hum of the air conditioner sounded like the cafe radio. By morning, I had to see for myself again. When I arrived, the cafe door was locked and dark inside. "Closed for maintenance," a sign said. But there was a faint glow coming from the window booth. I pressed my face to the glass. Inside on the table sat 2 cups of coffee, one steaming, one cold, and across from them I could just make out Hannah's outline, motionless facing the empty seat. The cafe reopened a few days later, with a new staff. I went in, pretending not to notice the change. A young barista greeted me with a cheerful voice. "Welcome to Morning Brew. What can I get you?" "Just coffee," I said. I looked toward the booth. It was empty now, wiped clean. "Do you still have the manager, Hannah?" I asked. The girl frowned. "Who?" "Hannah, the woman who worked mornings." She shook her head. "I've been here since the reopening. You must be thinking of someone else." I forced a smile and sat near the window. The coffee tasted strange, too sweet, too warm. As I set it down, the lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. My reflection in the glass had vanished when I looked up. In its place, I saw the faint outline of someone wearing a brown coat, sitting across from me on the other side of the window, inside the reflection itself. He smiled. "You're late." My chair screeched backward, spilling coffee across the table. When I blinked, he was gone again. But outside, on the wet pavement, there were footprints, bare, pale, leading toward my car. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2:50 a.m., my phone buzzed with an unknown number. The caller ID read Morning Brew Café. I answered without thinking. For a few seconds, there was only static. Then a familiar voice whispered, "You forgot to clock out." I threw the phone across the room. The screen cracked, but the call didn't end. The voice kept talking, faint, almost conversational. "We've saved you a seat." The next morning, I went to the cafe again. This time, daylight made it look harmless. Customers laughed, baristas smiled, and the same old music played. But when I reached the counter, the cashier looked up and said, "Oh, it's you. Hannah left something for you." She handed me a small envelope, yellowed around the edges. Inside was a faded receipt. Medium coffee, paid, table 7, Eli'd on the back. Written in shaky pen, "He doesn't sit alone anymore." Now, every morning when I drive past that corner, I tell myself not to look, but I always do. And sometimes, just for a second, I see them through the glass. Hannah and Eli, sitting across from each other in the booth, steam rising between them like fog. And if you ever visit Maple Hollow, you'll know the place by the sound. Because even when the cafe's lights are off and the doors are locked, you can still hear the faint jingle of a service bell and a voice asking, "Would you like your coffee to stay or to go?" They say every smell has a memory. For me, the smell of roasted coffee will always mean blood. It started when I transferred to a new city after college. Harper's Mill, population 4,000, with one gas station, one hardware store, and one Morning Brew Café sitting on the corner of Main and Elm. Everyone in town seemed to treat that place like a shrine. There wasn't much else to do at night except sit under its buzzing lights and watch the snow drift past the window. I got a job there almost by accident. I'd stopped in for a cup and mentioned to the cashier that I was seeking employment. She smiled and said, "We always are." That's how I met Travis, the store manager. He was short, wide-shouldered, and always sweating, even in the cold. He kept saying things like, "This branch is special and we make the strongest brew in the state." I thought he was just proud of his coffee. On my first night, he handed me an apron and a key ring. "You'll open the shop with me. We grind everything fresh here, house blend, medium roast, and the special batch downstairs." "Downstairs?" I repeated. He nodded. "Our secret basement roaster. You'll smell it soon enough." At first, everything felt normal. The customers were kind. The tips were decent. I learned to tune out the constant hum of the espresso machine. But sometimes, around 2 a.m., that hum seemed to change pitch like it was breathing. The other baristas joked about it. "That's just the pipes," said Mara, who'd worked there the longest. "Or maybe the roaster is calling for a refill." She laughed, but her eyes darted toward the trapdoor behind the counter. It was bolted shut with a steel latch that looked newer than the floorboards around it. After closing, Travis always went down there alone. He'd carry a burlap sack over his shoulder and return 20 minutes later dusted in something dark. Not quite coffee grounds, not quite ash. Once, when I tried to peek as he unlocked the hatch, he turned so fast his neck popped. "Curiosity kills more than cats," he said, smiling too wide. 2 weeks passed before he trusted me enough to help. "Tonight you'll learn where the real flavor comes from," he said. The snow outside had piled against the windows. No one had come in for hours. He unlatched the trapdoor and motioned for me to follow. The stairs creaked under our boots. The air grew heavier with every step, thick with the smell of burnt caramel and iron. When we reached the bottom, I saw the roaster, a massive, rust-red drum turning slowly over blue flames. The light flickered across the concrete walls, revealing dark stains that spidered outward like veins. Travis tossed the sack into the drum. Something inside hit the metal with a dull thud. Too heavy for beans, too soft for tools. He closed the lid and pulled a lever. The machine groaned like a throat swallowing. I tried to steady my voice. "What's in there?" He didn't answer at first. Then he said, "Every great cup starts with sacrifice. The company learned that years ago. We just keep the recipe alive." He turned off the lights, leaving only the glow from the roaster's window. Inside, shapes shifted in the flame, something that looked almost human curling tighter as the heat rose. I ran. He didn't try to stop me. Maybe he didn't need to. When I burst through the front door into the snow, I realized the smell had followed me. Sweet and metallic, clinging to my coat like smoke. The next morning I told the sheriff. He nodded politely, took a few notes, and said he'd look into it. I never heard back. By the time I worked up the nerve to return, the cafe was open as usual. New faces behind the counter. The trapdoor was gone, sealed under brand new tile. Travis wasn't there. When I asked about him, the new manager said, "He transferred." We get that a lot. I quit without clocking in. But the smell, God, the smell stayed with me. Every time I brewed coffee at home, it turned my stomach. The steam would rise and twist into shapes that looked like hands reaching for me. 3 months later, a letter arrived with no return address. Inside was a coupon for 1 free drink, Morning Brew Café. On the back, written in pen, were 3 words. "New blend ready." I threw it away. That night I dreamed of the basement again. The spinning drum, the scraping metal, and something whispering my name from inside the flames. When I woke, the smell of roasted beans filled my apartment. My coffee maker was empty. I moved the next week. Last month I drove through Harper's Mill again on my way to a job interview. Curiosity got the better of me. The cafe still stood there, brighter and cleaner than I remembered. A new banner flapped outside, now serving our boldest blend yet. I parked across the street, telling myself I'd just grab a cup to see if it tasted like it used to. Inside, a cheerful teenage barista greeted me. "Welcome back! Would you like to try the signature roast?" I nodded, pretending my hands weren't shaking. The cafe smelled exactly the same, rich, thick, too perfect. She handed me a steaming cup with a sticker on the lid that read Basement Blend. I asked, "Who's the manager now?" She smiled. "Oh, Travis still oversees the roasting. He just works downstairs most days." The breath caught in my throat. "Downstairs?" She pointed toward the back. "He's right there if you want to say hi." Through the swinging kitchen door, I saw a shadow move across the floor, short, broad, unmistakable. But something was wrong with the way it moved, jerky and mechanical, like bones cracking in reverse. The barista tilted her head. He always remembers his old employees. He said you'd be back for another taste. I set the cup on the counter and turned to leave. But as I pushed the door open, a voice rose behind me, smooth and cheerful, the same voice I'd hoped never to hear again. "Careful," Travis called. "Once it hooks you, you never leave." I looked down. Steam from the untouched cup curled around my hands, thick and red-tinted under the light. That was 3 nights ago. This morning, when I opened my cupboard, there was a burlap sack sitting on the shelf, stained dark, tied with a string and still warm to the touch. It smells like coffee. They say the worst part of working a drive-thru isn't the rush or the rude customers, it's the waiting. The long, quiet minutes between orders when the world outside seems too still are the worst part of working a drive-thru. That's when you start to hear things you shouldn't. I learned this during my 2nd week at the Morning Brew Café off Highway 17. The place sat right on the edge of town, one of those 24-hour branches built for truckers and night shift workers. I'd taken the job because I needed extra cash for college. The manager, Lydia, told me it would be easy. Just keep the window clean and the coffee hot. Simple enough. The first few nights were boring. The lot would empty after midnight, and I'd spend hours staring at the glowing Open 24 HRS sign reflected in the glass. Sometimes I'd watch the security camera feed, 4 black and white squares showing empty parking spots. a flickering hallway, and the side door by the dumpster. Then one night, around 2:15 a.m., a car pulled up, an old beige sedan. Engine idling rough, the headlights stayed off. I greeted them through the speaker. No response, just static. I waited, thinking maybe the mic had cut out. Then a voice crackled through, slow, gravelly, like it came from underwater. Large, dark roast, extra sweet. Something in the tone froze me. It wasn't angry, it was familiar. When I slid open the window, the car was empty. No driver, no passenger, just the faint smell of burnt sugar drifting in. Shut the window and hit the security monitor. Every camera showed clear. Then, the order printer spat out a ticket on its own. L. Dark roast, basement blend. I hadn't entered it. Neither had Lydia. She was in the back counting inventory. I crumpled the ticket and tossed it. But the printer immediately printed another. Identical slip. And another. And another. The tiny machine whirred until the counter was littered with paper. Lydia came up front. "What are you doing?" "Glitch," I said, but she looked pale. She reached for the printer cord, hesitated, then whispered, "Don't touch it when it's running." I stared at her. "Why?" She just said, "Company policy," and walked away. By 3 a.m., the storm had started. Rain hammered the awning. A few truckers came and went. Nothing strange until the cameras blinked out. One by one, the monitor filled with static except for the dumpster view, where a tall shape stood just outside the light. It wasn't moving, it was just there. I leaned closer. For a second, lightning flashed and I saw it clearly. A man in an apron, short and broad-shouldered, face hidden by the brim of his cap. He was holding something heavy in one hand. The camera fizzed, and the picture vanished. I called Lydia, but she didn't answer. I went to the hallway. The office door was open. The chair spun slowly. Papers scattered on the floor, coffee still steaming on the desk. "No, Lydia." I heard a soft ding from the drive-thru headset. Someone had pulled up again. The same voice whispered, "You forgot my change." My hands shook as I approached the window. Rain blurred everything outside. I could barely make out a shadow leaning over the counter shelf. When the lightning flashed again, I saw his name tag, Travis. I slammed the window shut and stumbled back. The door to the back room creaked open behind me. A cold draft rolled through, carrying that familiar scent, burnt caramel and iron. Something moved inside the supply closet. I backed toward the exit, but the lights above flickered one after another, following me like footsteps. The intercom crackled again, a woman's voice this time, soft, trembling. "Please, don't go. It's worse if they have to chase you." I froze. It was Hannah. I'd heard her name whispered by other employees, the Maple Hollow manager who vanished. Her voice came through every speaker now, overlapping itself. "They roast us when we leave. That's why the coffee's always fresh." The words dissolved into static and screaming feedback, then silence. I grabbed my phone to call 911, but the screen filled with the Morning Brew logo, glitching, spinning, and flickering between colors. A message appeared. "New update available, install now." Before I could hit cancel, the speaker above me turned on again. That same gravelly male voice whispered, "Once it hooks you." The power cut out. The emergency lights glowed dim red. In the reflection of the drive-thru glass, I saw movement behind me, shapes crawling along the walls, dragging long, wet shadows that dripped onto the tile. I ran for the front door, but the automatic locks clicked. Outside, headlights flared, dozens of cars idling in the rain, their windows fogged from the inside. Each windshield glowed faintly, showing silhouettes sitting perfectly still, all holding cups. The smell of roasted beans filled the air, so thick it burned my throat. I pounded on the door until my fists hurt. When I turned around, someone was standing behind the counter. Lydia, but her eyes were empty, pupils gone white like burned paper. She held a steaming cup toward me. "Drink," she said. "It's company policy." I shook my head and backed away. The cup trembled in her hands. Something inside it was moving. I saw a finger rise through the surface, skin blistered, nails black. She smiled. "It's still fresh. The emergency lights flickered out. I don't remember running." but I woke up on the shoulder of the highway, soaked and shivering. The cafe glowing behind me like a lighthouse in the storm. By the time the police arrived, it was empty. No Lydia, no cars, no sign anyone had been there. Just the smell. They found my headset still on the counter. When they played back the night's recordings, every channel was filled with static, except one. A voice had whispered into the microphone at 2:15 a.m. Large, dark roast. Extra sweet. Then a woman's voice followed, faint but clear.